What if the greatest spiritual discovery of the 20th century happened at the exact moment humanity gained the power to both destroy the world and build a machine intelligence to control it? Around 1945, we saw the beginning of the nuclear age, the computer age, and the UFO age. But in that same year, in the Egyptian desert, came the discovery of the Nag Hammadi Gnostic texts, warning of powerful forces called Archons who govern our false reality. Coincidence? There are no coincidences. I think that trove of wisdom was delivered to us at that precise moment in time for a reason. And in this video, I'm going to explain what I think that reason was and why the Gnostic tradition contains information we'll need to survive and thrive during this technologically supercharged Imperial era. This is World Astrology Report. I'm your host, Dan Waites, and welcome to another journey into the past to understand the present and the future. The Nag Hammadi library is a trove of ancient Gnostic texts. But what is Gnosticism? Well, it's an umbrella term for a bunch of spiritual movements that emerged in the cosmopolitan melting pot of Alexandria in Egypt in the 1st and 2nd centuries AD. Gnostics held that this world was ruled by a flawed, incompetent, or false god, the Demiurge, sometimes called Yaldabaoth and depicted as a lion-faced creature with the body of a serpent. The Demiurge rules the world through its servants, powers known as Archons, in turn served by less powerful entities. It's a grim vision, but Gnosticism also has a message of hope. The Gnostics held that humans are essentially divine sparks trapped in this flawed world. The idea of Earth being a prison planet, which you often hear in mystical and conspiracy circles these days, is in essence a Gnostic idea. But the Gnostics believed there was a higher realm than this one and a higher god than the Demiurge, often called the monad. And they held that by engaging in certain mystical practices, human beings could gain first-hand knowledge of that higher world. Gnosis means knowledge. Many, but not all Gnostic sects were Christian. They held that emanations of the monad would appear on earth and try to rescue human beings from this prison, and that Jesus Christ was one of these figures. Gnosticism is another kind of Christianity, one that never made it, so to speak, at least not yet. For many reasons, Gnosticism was denounced by the early church fathers and declared heretical. One of those reasons is that many Gnostics took a dim view of the God of the Hebrew Bible. He was the Demiurge. And another reason is that Gnosticism is fundamentally skeptical about and even hostile to earthly power structures. And yet Gnosticism actually seems to thrive at times when expansive power structures are at their strongest and most pervasive. And that, besides some amazing astrology, is what links the time of the Gnostics to our own imperial moment. Gnosticism thrived in Alexandria in Egypt in the 1st and 2nd centuries AD. At that time, Alexandria was part of the Roman Empire, a time when Rome was at its most powerful and threatening. In the last decades of the 1st millennium BC, Rome had turned from a republic where power was shared between elected magistrates, the Senate, and popular assemblies, into an empire where power was concentrated in one man, the emperor. And so Gnosticism emerged in an imperial moment. Of course, empires tend to drive cultural cross-pollination, and Alexandria was indeed a melting pot of cultures. Gnosticism was informed by Judaism and early Christianity, Greek philosophy, Egyptian religion, and the astral religion of Mesopotamia, among other influences. But there's something else. The Gnostic cosmology posits that the world is governed by these all-powerful archons. And so it grows when the conditions of the material world most obviously reflect that vision. And here's where we get into the astrology. The planetary cycle that governs great shifts in belief systems and power structures is the 492-year Pluto-Neptune cycle. The cycle of Pluto and Neptune that was active at the time of Rome's shift from republic to empire and the coming of Christ and the emergence of the Gnostic sects began with conjunctions in the sign of Taurus in 84 and 83 BC. The period around those conjunctions was a seeding period. It foreshadowed those later developments. In the bonus section of this video, available for members of World Astrology Report, whether here on YouTube or at worldastrologyreport.com, we see how Rome's transformation from republic to empire and the coming of Jesus Christ were both foreshadowed years in advance during that time. Now, one of the traditional divisions of the zodiac is the terms or bounds, whereby each sign is divided into 5 unequal sections, each of them allocated to one of the 5 traditional planets. The terms are like rooms in a house or states in a country. The planet ruling a term heavily influences planets within it. Now, there are a couple of different systems of terms. I prefer the Egyptian terms. The conjunctions of 84 and 83 BC took place in the Taurus Egyptian term belonging to Jupiter. Jupiter, or Zeus to the Greeks, was the king of the gods. And so Jupiter is the planet of empire, the planet of emperors. Jupiter is also the planet of growth and expansion. He gathers all together in one heavy embrace. The current French president, Emmanuel Macron, tried to style himself as so-called Emperor Jupiter, an all-powerful and distant leader who couldn't be challenged or approached by mere mortals. I think it's fair to say he hasn't exactly proved worthy of that title. But planetary archetypes are multifaceted. And so Jupiter is also the planet of Gnosis, meaning knowledge that comes not so much from book learning as with Mercury, but from personal experience. Both of Jupiter's zodiac signs, Sagittarius and Pisces, have to do with this kind of knowledge. Sagittarius brings the knowing we can only get from heading out into the world and following our will. Pisces brings the gnosis of the mystic, whose boundaries are down and open to messages from the cosmos. So again, after a Pluto-Neptune conjunction in Jupiter's term, we saw Rome entering its imperial phase, as well as the emergence of Gnostic thought. And guess what? We didn't see conjunctions of Pluto and Neptune in a Jupiter-ruled Egyptian term again until 1891 and 1892, when the current cycle that we're living through began. And that implies that ours are times of empire and of gnosis. If you're enjoying this video so far, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel and enable notifications. All that stuff really helps by telling YouTube you're into this stuff, and it helps my channel a lot. Thanks. In 1891 and 1892, we saw 3 conjunctions of Pluto and Neptune in the sign of Gemini in the 8th and 9th degrees of that sign. That put those conjunctions in the Egyptian term of Jupiter, the king of the gods, the planet of imperialism and gnosis. Now, I've often said that if we want to understand our world today and where it's heading, we need to study that period around those conjunctions about the last quarter of the 19th century. Pretty much everything we see in the world today was expressed in embryonic or symbolic or imaginative form at that time. Read H.G. Wells, friends. Then, as now, the world, and America in particular, was dominated by extremely powerful Archonic forces. And we saw figures who foreshadowed the billionaires of today's world. This was the Gilded Age, the time when industrialists and bankers, people like John D. Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, J.P. Morgan, and Cornelius Vanderbilt made incredible fortunes and became extremely well known. We even saw foreshadowings of the inventor-industrialist archetype in the form of Thomas Edison, who, it could be argued, was a sort of forerunner of Elon Musk, even if Elon would probably rather be thought of as a Tesla-like figure, as suggested by the name he gave his car company. And this period also saw early foreshadowings of the nuclear bomb, with the discovery of the electron in 1897, the computer in the form of the Hollerith tabulating machine of 1890, and the UFO in the form of the mystery airship wave of 1896 and 1897. And at this time, Gnostic ideas were explicitly circulating through the culture once again. This was the time of an occult revival led by Helena Blavatsky's Theosophical Society, whose motto, "There is no religion higher than truth," had a strongly Gnostic feel to it. Many of Blavatsky's teachings were straight out of Gnosticism. What's more, in 1890, a French Freemason named Jules Douanel founded a Gnostic church, l'Église Gnostique, in Paris, and explicitly declared the restoration of Gnosis. This was the first Gnostic church of modern times, and it was founded at the time of those conjunctions in the Egyptian term of Jupiter, planet of Gnosis. And there was another event that foreshadowed events still to come. In January 1896, a German scholar named Karl Reinhardt purchased an ancient manuscript in Egypt, which had been discovered at a Christian burial site. It came to be known as the Berlin Codex, and it turned out to contain a collection of ancient Gnostic texts, including the Gospel of Mary, the Apocryphon of John, and the Sophia of Jesus Christ. This event created very little fanfare at the time, but it eerily foreshadowed events in the 20th century, a Gnostic century, just like the 21st. I want to give a quick shout out here to another YouTube channel, namely Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio, because funnily enough, that channel recently released a video called Why Gnosticism Matters More Than Ever Today. I ran into it just as I was finishing this script, and it covers some of the same ground as I do here. There are no coincidences. Miguel has a deep knowledge of Gnosticism, no pun intended, and if you're into this subject, you'll get a kick out of that video, I think. It's linked below. Now, you could cite any number of events and people and ideas of the 20th century that highlight it as a Gnostic century. It was a century of totalitarianism when we saw the potential for human, earthly structures to attain truly archonic power. Think of the Nazis and the Soviet Union and Mao's China. But it was also one where all the certainties that materialist science had come to believe was shredded into little bits. Quantum physics showed that matter is essentially without form until it's observed. It suggested a level of unreality to reality that would have greatly pleased the original Gnostics. And various other thinkers like Carl Jung, who was basically a Gnostic, began to identify the hidden but powerful forces driving change in humans and the world. And others saw through scientific materialism's illusions. One of those people was Charles Fort, who worked to catalogue strange events that broke the rules of how reality was supposed to work. Things like weird stuff and creatures falling from the sky, strange objects and lights like UFOs, and reports of people and objects vanishing and teleporting, among many other curiosities. Fort called our changing understanding of the world dominance, which means something like paradigms, and which he said had to exclude aspects of reality to make any sense. Fort came to a terrifying conclusion that human beings were being toyed with and manipulated by strange, mostly hidden forces. More than that, in the Book of the Damned of 1919, he wrote that he concluded that human beings were property. He said, quote, that once upon a time this earth was no man's land, but that now it's owned by something. That something owns this earth, all others warned off. Shades of the Archons, I think you'll agree. Now, in the mid-1940s, Pluto and Neptune moved into orb at their first major aspect, the sextile. You would expect this time to move forward those developments that surfaced in the zeitgeist in the 1890s conjunctional period, and that's exactly what happened. As we saw at the start of this video, the mid-1940s were an incredibly strange period in history. We saw vivid demonstrations of the power that humanity was attaining. The nuclear bomb showed that world-ending power was now in human hands. We saw the invention of the first computers, like 1945's ENIAC, and of the transistor in 1947, which would supercharge the digital revolution. Of course, today we're seeing how these tools are being used to construct something like a global technocratic nervous system, one facilitating the mass manipulation of human minds, as well as a surveillance system far exceeding Joseph Stalin's wildest dreams. What's more, during the Second World War came the first emergence of the UFO phenomenon with the sightings of the so-called Foo Fighters, soon followed by the beginning of the Great Flying Saucer Wave with Kenneth Arnold's sighting of several strange craft in 1947. Oh, and Roswell. Again, all this was foreshadowed in the 1890s with the mystery airship sightings. Later in the 20th century, UFO researchers like Jacques Vallée took a similar approach as Charles Fort had, collecting case reports no matter how bizarre they might be and trying to spot patterns. Vallée came to similar conclusions to Fort about the nature of the phenomenon. He proposed that UFO experiences are designed to subtly manipulate human belief at a deep mythical level, and so to shape, guide or control human societies. This is what people know as Vallée's control system theory, and once again, it has a strongly Gnostic flavor. And weirdly, Vallée played a key role in the development of the internet, helping to build its forerunner, ARPANET. There's a strange parallel there, you might agree. Regardless, the UFO phenomenon poses a question. Is it really the revelation of the existence of the Archons and their minions? Or is it all a psyop, a grand manipulation by human beings playing an archonic role? Or is it somehow both of these things at once? Anyway, back to the 1940s. In 1945, the same year as nuclear bombs were used on Japan and the first computer was completed, came the discovery of a massive trove of Gnostic texts hidden in the jar buried near the small desert town of Nag Hammadi in Egypt. those texts had remained hidden for more than 15 centuries. The find included many texts that had never been seen before, including new Gospels like the Gospel of Thomas, a compilation of the sayings of Jesus that paint him less as a suffering Messiah and more like a Zen teacher awakening students with cryptic riddles and provocations. That finding at Nag Hammadi was foreshadowed perfectly during the conjunctional period of the Pluto-Neptune cycle with the discovery of the Berlin Codex, also in Egypt, in 1896. And I think that we can see this discovery as a gift from Mercury, the ruler of Gemini, where the current cycle began, and from Jupiter, the ruler of Gnosis. I think these texts are essentially a survival guide to the world that was being born at that time. And I think the wisdom inside them will help us to survive and thrive in the current cycle. Gnostic ideas are indeed everywhere today, and there's astrology that suggests there's something about the next few years and when its principles might become especially relevant. The Nag Hammadi texts were discovered in December of 1945. I couldn't find the precise date, but here's the position of the three powerful outer planets on December the 1st of that year. We have Uranus in Gemini, Neptune in Libra, and Pluto in Leo. They're widely in a powerful configuration we call a minor grand trine. And funnily enough, this is exactly the aspect pattern they're in right now. But Pluto is currently in Aquarius, the opposing sign to Leo, where it was in 1945. In April, Uranus will return to Gemini, where it was in 1945. And Neptune is now back in Aries, opposing Libra, where it was in 1945. So this very period has powerful cyclical resonance to that time, to the invention of the computer, the nuclear bomb, the first UFO wave, and the discoveries of the Gnostic texts. And if you think about the world we're already in 2026, well, I think it's a Gnostic's world. Our lives, more and more, are at the mercy of algorithms and AI. These technological forces don't just decide what we see when we're scrolling on our phones. They're able to influence our beliefs and perception of reality itself. And they're being used more and more to decide if you're one of the good people who get to enjoy state privileges or a bad person who doesn't. And consider companies like Palantir, founded by Peter Thiel, the power behind Donald Trump's throne. Palantir is working to make predictive policing, that's detecting crime before it even happens, a reality. This is something already dreamed of by neo-Gnostic sci-fi writer Philip K. Dick in his story The Minority Report. In the past few decades, we've seen the rise of a billionaire class with historically unprecedented levels of wealth and power. It's become clear to most people who are paying attention that real power doesn't lie with politicians and political parties, but with the denizens of the power layers above them. We've recently lived through an insane period of history in which we all plugged ourselves and our children into social networks controlled by algorithms designed to addict, outrage, and manipulate us. We're spending huge amounts of our time immersed in the digital world, an unreal facsimile of reality, a poor copy, the world that the Gnostics warned us about. And some of the same figures driving the digital revolution, people like Elon Musk, have suggested that reality itself may be a simulation. Again, this is a Gnostic idea. And I think that what's truly Gnostic about the current moment is how seemingly inescapable the power structures are becoming, or at least being perceived as. But I want to emphasize that Gnosticism also contains within it a message of hope. The essential Gnostic insight is that the world we're living in is not the highest reality, and that through certain practices, it's possible for us to experience that higher reality and to know that it's there. I think that one of the things that the discovery of the Nag Hammadi text is pointing us towards, besides the nature of the Archonic control system, is the direction in which religion and spirituality will move. I think they're shifting towards mysticism and practices that bring individuals into contact with the divine. Indeed, this is at the essence of the massive and growing popularity of psychedelics and practices like meditation and yoga today. I think we're past the stage of history where we're all meant to just take orders from priests and be members of the obedient flock. These are mercurial times when we're forced to make choices about how to live ourselves, to choose between good and evil, sin and saintliness, heaven and hell. And we're supposed to work towards getting in touch with the divine, rather than just taking it on a priest's word that it's out there. To be clear, this isn't meant to be an attack on Christianity or any particular religion. All religions have their mystical branches. Judaism has the Kabbalah. Christianity has its esoteric and mystical tradition. Islam has Sufism. In the coming years, with Pluto in Aquarius, I think we're going to see technology achieving terrifying degrees of power over everyday lives. But Gnosticism holds the key to how we can fight back by working to connect to the divine and retaining sovereignty over our souls. We're probably going to see governments moving to a totalizing surveillance model, but I think we're also going to see a wave of people opting out of those systems and organizing themselves into small groups of like-minded people. That's Aquarian, and it's also how the Gnostics organized themselves. They gathered in small groups, in private homes, in small circles. They lived inside empire, but didn't spiritually belong to it. So I think there's going to be a trend towards people forming communities and quietly resisting the system and trying to retain sovereignty in those ways. It will be a time of both centralization and decentralization. And if you want more tips on how to thrive in the coming years, well, you might just want to study the Gospel of Thomas. That's almost it for this video. If you enjoyed it, then you might also want to check out my conversation with RuneSoup's Dan Waites on some of these same topics. In the bonus section of this video, available for members of World Astrology Report, we are going to look again at that cycle of Pluto and Neptune that began in 84 BC. And what we're going to see is two remarkable things, foreshadowings of both the end of the Roman Republic and the coming of Jesus Christ. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again on the channel soon.